হ্যালো, আসসালামু আলাইকুম বন্ধুরা। আমি ইউটিউব লাইভে চলে আসলাম। আজকে ইউটিউব লাইভে গাড়ি চালাবো, আপনারা দেখবেন। আজকে আমি ইউটিউব লাইভে গাড়ি চালাবো বন্ধুরা। আমার দিলে নাই রে সাদা, আমার মনে নাই রে সাদা কালা। হ্যাঁ বন্ধুরা, লাইভ চলতেছে আমার আজকে, ডাইরেক্ট সরাসরি গাড়ি চালান লাইভ। দেখুন বন্ধুরা, চলে আসুন। দেখছেন আজকে আমার সরাসরি লাইভ চলছে। তো আজকে আমার গাড়ি চালানি সরাসরি লাইভ চলতেছে বন্ধুরা, চলে আসুন। দেখুন ঢাকা শহরের কি হালচাল অবস্থা বন্ধুরা। হ্যাঁ বন্ধুরা, এটা এক সময় অনেক পপুলার বাণিজ্য মেলা ছিল, তার পাশ দিয়ে আমি যাচ্ছি বন্ধুরা। কৃষি বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের পাশ দিয়ে আমি যাচ্ছি বন্ধুরা। এটাই বাস্তব, এটাই বাস্তব বন্ধুরা, এটাই বাস্তব। হা হা হা, আই লাভ ইউ। হা 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 হা, আই লাভ ইউ। ওরে তোমাকে বন্ধু আমার চিকন কালা, তোমার লাইগাছে বালা বন্ধু আমার চিকন কালা, তোমার লাইগাছে ভালা। এটাই বাস্তব, রিপন ডায়লগ, এটাই বাস্তব।
Of sanctions on Syria would be a huge boost for a country that has been shattered by more than a decade of civil war. Meanwhile, Donald Trump announced a $600 billion commitment from Saudi Arabia to invest in the U.S. According to the White House, the U.S. agreed to sell Saudi Arabia an arms package worth nearly $142 billion yesterday. Cricket and Bangladesh A team will face New Zealand A in their first match of the two-match four-day cricket series at Sylhet International Cricket Stadium today. The match is scheduled to start at 9:30 a.m. The second and last match will be held in the same venue on May 21. Finally, weather and forecast valid till 1 this afternoon says there are chances of rain or thunder showers with temporary west-northwesterly gusty or squally wind at a speed of 45 to 60 kilometers per hour over the regions of Rangpur, Mamasi, Kumilla and Sylhet. We will post to these areas at to host cautionary signal number 1. To end the news, the main points again. Chief Advisor is to visit his hometown Chattogram today for the first time since assuming office. The government splits NBR into two distinct entities to improve efficiency and broaden the country's tax base. The move will not affect revenue collection, says the finance advisor. Notification to ban activities of the Awami League will not hamper freedom of expression of other people or political parties, the government clarifies. Elections are entirely Bangladesh's internal matter, says the Chief Advisor's press secretary. All-out efforts are being taken to make forthcoming aid journey safe, says the Road Transport and Bridges Advisor. Selling of advanced train tickets begins from May 21st. High Court commutes sentences of 10 convicts in Ramna Bottomul bomb attack case. Maghura Court sets next Saturday to deliver verdict in Asia rape and murder case. The US President announces to lift all sanctions on Syria, ending years of Washington's policy. And Bangladesh A team take on New Zealand A in the first unofficial cricket test at Sylhet today. That is the end of the news. The news will also be available on our website at www.beta.gov.bd. Our next bulletin will be at 9 this morning in Bangla.
Bangladesh ট্রাফিক সম্প্রচার কার্যক্রম বাংলাদেশ বেতার FM 88.8 মেগাহার্টজ।
একটু মাথাটা ঠান্ডা করে বাসা থেকে বের হবেন। হ্যাঁ, আর পজিটিভ থাকুন, পজিটিভ রাখুন। ততক্ষণ গান শুনে আসি, তারপর আরো কথা হবে।
তুমি এ শহরে বান্ধিয়া প্রেমের মালা
Square sugar lumps, so they're really big blocks of ice, but that's exactly what it looks like. And also you get a lot more life along the Antarctic Peninsula. But Halley, you can really go days without seeing any living thing at all apart from the other people on the station.
Talking about life on Antarctica, talk to me about penguins, will you?
Well, there's a whole variety of different penguins, and they can be quite inquisitive. So if you just stand still, they'll come up towards you, and they'll sort of do this sort of motion where they're sort of looking around.
Swinging their heads by the look of things.
Yes, and the reason is they're rather like me, and they actually need to wear glasses when they're on land because their eyesight is adapted for seeing underwater when they're looking for prey or for being hunted, but on the land there aren't really any predators, so they don't need to see well. I've also had I suppose it's the privilege of helping some of our biologists study what penguins eat, in particular macaroni penguins.
How do you do that?
First of all, you have to catch your penguin, which is easier said than done. And it requires a bit like a rugby tackle to get the penguin. And then you essentially put it in a straitjacket because the penguin wings are very bony. And so if they flap their wings, there's a risk that they'll break your arm because they're that powerful. And then you pour some slightly warmed seawater down their throat and hold them upside down over a bucket. And they regurgitate the stomach contents into the bucket. So the biologists can then discover exactly what they've been eating.
That is quite a job, though, isn't it? Making penguins sick.
A very different sort of task, one which I never expected to have to do as a physical scientist. And that's one of the great things about Antarctica. You get to be involved with a lot of other people down there because you have to help each other out. And so this was one of the more interesting ways of helping out that I'd experienced down there.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer being out in that amazing landscape or in an office looking at data?
Oh, definitely being outside. And I think that's why I do these days a lot of botany because it involves wandering around, sometimes in nice parts of the world, sometimes in not so nice parts where it's very boring flora. But you can usually find something interesting no matter where you go. So yes, going down to Antarctica and seeing the environment of Antarctica, experiencing the wildlife, the scenery, the weather down there, which can be really awesome at times when you've got a full gale blowing. You can literally see only a few meters, and then you have to use a hand line to get from one place to another, or even just not go out at all. Hearing the little grains of ice that have been blown out pinging off your windproofs is quite an unusual sensation.
When you were not having adventures in Antarctica in the late 70s, early 80s, what was your desk job?
So the desk job was pretty boring, and it would have been for many people because you were spending hours and hours and hours just working through the data, looking at ozone data that had been measured in Antarctica and needed to compute how much ozone was actually present.
Over how many years? How many years data did you have with you?
So my boss of the day, Joe Farman, had done it up to the early 70s, and it was my job to bring it up to date into the early 80s time period. So about 10 years or so of data that hadn't been worked up properly. And it turned out, in the end, that those were the critical 10 years that really mattered.
Scientists had been monitoring ozone levels in the upper atmosphere since the 1950s, initially because they thought it might help with weather forecasting. But once that job was taken over by computers, many lost interest in keeping an eye on ozone. And by the late 70s, there was talk of stopping altogether. But around the same time, a handful of scientists were raising concerns that human-made gases called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, widely used in things like fridges and aerosols, might be damaging the atmosphere. Also, there was a more headline-grabbing concern about the most glamorous form of transport at the time, supersonic flight.
Concorde has taken off. Not as feared, the noisiest airliner in the world, but in its time, the most controversial.
Good evening. In tonight's discussion programme from the Royal Institution, we're going to hear from scientists who've thought a lot about the Anglo-French supersonic aeroplane Concorde, and in particular about whether or not it will have a serious effect on the environment.
Around about that time, we had an open day at the Antarctic Survey here in Cambridge. And I thought, well, there's all this fuss about Concorde exhaust destroying the ozone layer and these gases called chlorofluorocarbons destroying the ozone layer. I'll show people this year's ozone data. It'll be the same as my boss had done a decade earlier, and people don't need to worry.
Oh, so you thought you'd put the data out there and say Concorde supersonic planes are fine,
Yep.
CFCs are fine?
That was the thought from me as an ignorant young scientist who knew no better. And it turned out, of course, that the springtime values of that year were much lower than they had been when my boss looked at it. So I thought, well, this is really exciting. Maybe CFCs are having an effect after all. So I excitedly put together a poster for the open day. And my boss said, I think you better take that bit of the graph off because you're using slightly experimental techniques. We don't want people getting the wrong idea. Next year it might be twice as high and you'd look really silly. So I thought, I'm not sure about that. But nevertheless, he's the boss, so you do what you're told.
To be fair to his bosses, Jonathan's discovery flew in the face of accepted wisdom about the ozone layer, but he wouldn't drop it.
Problem really was that it was quite a clear signal, and that wasn't expected. So was it possible that I was doing something wrong?
Did you think you might be doing something wrong?
I didn't, because if you were going to see something going wrong with the instrument, it was inconceivable that it would only go wrong in the spring. So it must be something that's external to the instrument, and therefore it's in the data.
So you went back and you looked at more years worth of data?
Yeah, because my boss said it's like the old adage, 2 swallows don't make a summer. So you've got to see a whole flock of swallows before you can be convinced that summer is starting. And he wanted to see that whole flock of low ozone values. So I was able to go back through. Well, I think